Hello, this is Fear Dragon coming at you with another StarCraft 2 netcast. Today we have game number 4 between these two players, TSLHyun and MilleniumAdelscott. So if you have not seen game number 1, game number 2, or game number 3, go ahead and check those out in the annotations below. But at this point I'm going to assume you have, so I'm going to go ahead and give the spoilers alert and introduce these players. Spawning down here in the bottom left hand corner of Daybreak, we have the blue Zerg player changing up his color scheme, but we're going to see if it's going to matter as he is currently up 2-1 against his Protoss opponent. His name is Hyun, and he is representing Team TSL as the Korean Code A level Zerg. And his opponent, spawning in the top right hand corner of Daybreak, we have the orange Protoss player, the French Protoss, and he is currently down 1-2, and he is known as the gateway style Protoss player. We have been seeing quite a gateway centric style in this past couple of games, but more importantly, he has not been going for those forge fast expands, has not been going for those gateway wall-offs out of the ramp, just going for gateway positions like this. We're going to see if he can take this game and the next one to come back in this best of 5 series. His name is Adelscott, and he is representing Team Millennium. Now, once again, we're going to see how is TSLHyun going to react to the fact that his opponent is once again not walling off. We do actually see very similar build to game number 1 and actually game number 3, going for that early spawning pool and that early gas guys are going to allow him to get up those Zergling speed. That's going to be very useful for getting those Zerglings across the map and putting on some of that early aggression, especially when your opponent has not walled off. You can definitely do a good amount of damage, but we did see Adelscott is not completely in the dark, is not just kind of like, for lack of better phrases that would be a little bit inappropriate, he's not just kind of twiddling his thumbs around and not really knowing what he's doing. He has his build mapped out so that he'll have at least one sentry out by the time 2 Zerglings will get around over here, and he'll have that second sentry out before any additional Zerglings can pop out and do a little bit of aggression based on TSLHyun's build right now. But despite that, he did take quite a bit of damage in game number 3 just to those early Zerglings that were kind of pressuring his front, and it delayed his ability to take that early expansion. But one thing you do have to keep in mind again though is that Hyun producing all these Zerglings does delay that droning up. He's going to be sitting on 15 drones for a little while, I imagine, at least up until he has the point where, you know, he has a good number of Zerglings to put on some good pressure on Adelscott and punish him for really not being able to wall off. And in the meanwhile, we do see Hyun actually taking that expansion. This is definitely going to work out in his favor. He needs that larva to continue producing, especially when you have this kind of drone count, and you also want that queen out. We do see that queen over there doing those good old larva injects. But more importantly, you do want to have some kind of transition out of this kind of aggression, as we've seen in all of his previous games. And what are you doing, Adelscott? Adelscott, do you have any... Oh my god, Adelscott doing 0 scouting, not going for the wall off at the ramp or anything. Going to be facing quite a bit of aggression from Hyun and might not be too happy. This might actually be a very, very short game. We're going to have to wait and see if Adelscott's going to be prepared for this. He does have, once again, that one sentry up, and the Zerglings, oh my god, they actually get up the ramp, and no, the sentry's going to get picked off by those Speedlings, and so is the Zealot. 4 Speedlings also in the main, so it's going to stop any kind of additional sentries from being able to force field out additional units and Zerglings from coming out, or coming into the game, or into the main base. And now we do see some nice little wall off on the pylon over here in Adelscott's main base, but it's just going to be a probe defense with this one sentry going to try and defend against this massive number of 10 Zerglings with reinforcements streaming in constantly, and Hyun smells blood. He's only producing Zerglings at this point, and now we see the probes coming out. They're trying to do some nice little micro going through those Zerglings, trying to get the nice surround, but I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. So many of these probes are so low on health, and now we can see the probe count is down to just 16, even though he is still ahead of his opponent. He is still behind in expansion, and he's still behind in terms of his his army, and with this massive number of Zerglings still streaming across the map, he's going to be very, very, very troubled in trying to throw up some kind of defense, and we do see just 2 sentries out. The warp gate technology has finished up, and with 2 gateways, he will be able to do a little bit of good defense, but unfortunately for him, these sentries are actually going to start falling immediately now, and we do see 18 drones to 18 probes. Even if Hyun does get completely cleaned up at this point, he's still going to be sitting in a very, very comfortable position. Now the speedlings getting in, there's no more energy on those sentries. Only 1 sentry with 1 force field actually, but it's not going to matter. All of the probes getting cleaned up for the most part, and it is going to force a GG out of Adelscott any second now. Go ahead and take a look. Hyun, being that good old Korean player, knows when he has basically won the game. Gonna go ahead and transition now. He's just building drones. What does he care? He's done enough damage at this point, so he can safely do whatever the hell he wants now. And we do see 3 gateways already out, and they are actually starting to warp in additional units, but is it going to matter? He can do a full wall off now finally with these 3 zealots, but even on hold position anyways, but it's not going to really matter. Now you do have to remember, TSLHyun is up 2-1 in this best of 5 series. That means if he wins this game, he wins the series. Adelscott just going to be completely knocked out. And, you know, that is a bit of a disappointing way to go, just because you did not decide to wall off. But I guess to each their own. MilleniumAdelscott kind of paying for his decision making. And even though he did show in game number 2 that it is possible to hold when your opponent goes for that hatchery first build, being a little bit stubborn and not really going for the wall off in any kind, really, kind of came back to bite him in the ass. I hate to say it, but that's kind of just the way that this series went. So anyways, we do see Hyun producing a couple additional Zerglings just to put on a little bit of additional pressure, stopping Adelscott from being able to easily take that expansion, considering he knows how good of an economic position he's in. He's basically doubling or over doubling his opponent's worker force, and of course he's going for that lair tech now, going through for that Roach Warren. Going to be able to feel pretty comfortable and basically being able to go for some kind of 2 base. Maybe I would kind of be surprised if Hyun took this to a 3 base game, but I suppose he could if he really wanted to play it safe. But I would be expecting some kind of Galileo reconstitution Roach all in at some point in the near future. Now we do actually see Adelscott finally able to get up that safe old expansion over here. As we can already see, Hyun really not trying to put on a huge amount more aggression. Doesn't want to really spend too much more larva on putting on that aggression. Just going to go ahead and do, oh man, another counterattack path getting prepared, it looks like. And once again, MilleniumAdelscott suffered from this before, and now we see in game number 4, he's going to suffer from it again. We do see the sentry throwing down those 2 force fields to stop this Zerglings from moving up into the main base, but I'm not sure it's going to matter. The entire army on the retreat once again, but these speedlings going to be able to do enough damage already, as they're going to be able to pick off that pylon, delay any kind of additional reinforcements from being able to do any kind of pressure, and now we see these speedlings actually just going ahead and retreating, not even going to sacrifice themselves in the main to do any kind of probe damage, as there are already 2 sentries already warped in and ready to defend. Not that I'm sure that they would have been able to do a whole lot if a lot more Zerglings decide to stream into the main and then additional reinforcements streamed into the natural, but it doesn't really matter. Adelscott is pinned to his base. This is basically the equivalent of having Mutalists swarming over your natural and your main, really forcing the Protoss opponent to stay at home and defend. So even if Adelscott had some kind of big counterattack path or some big pressure play planned, he really wouldn't be able to go through with it, honestly. And we do see TSLHyun did go for that 3rd expansion, so yeah, it is going to be a bit of a safe play, but it's going to ensure his victory for certain. Unless somehow Adelscott can make a miracle happen, and I honestly do mean a miracle. We're really going to be waiting to see what Adelscott can do to defend against this giant Roach army. And we do see over here, he does have quite a few of these sentries building up a lot of energy, but I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. And TSLHyun, realizing that he can just knock down these rocks, probably could even just come in from 2 different angles, waste a ton of force fields, and just go in with more units than he can really force field out, and eventually he will be able to break this giant wall off. And now we do see Adelscott trying to do a little bit of damage to this army, not really able to do a whole lot, does not want to move down that ramp, but now we do see the Roaches with that Galileo reconstitution finished up. He can basically move around, does actually have those destructible rocks finished up, and is just going to regroup with a couple more. And I did see actually a move point. This is exactly what I was talking about. Moving in from 2 different angles is going to be the way to go, in my opinion. Even though Adelscott is going to continue to warp in reinforcing units, he can spread his opponent up so thinly, and now we do see 2 force fields being forced to be used, and even though we do see the second reinforcing wave over at the main entrance of Adelscott's natural expansion, we do see that a couple of force fields being used to fend off all of those roaches and zerglings, but it's not going to matter. All of these roaches are going to be able to move in just a second, and all the zerglings and roaches moving into the natural expansion, you're going to be able to pick off away at those pylons, even be able to depower 2 of those gateways. Is going to be a huge blow to Adelscott, and there's going to be the GG. So very well played by these 2 players, but honestly that game was kind of decided a little while ago once Adelscott decided not to wall off, and Hyun was able to get in with those zerglings and do that massive amount of worker and economic damage to his opponent. So very well played by both these players. And TSLHyun taking the series 3-1, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is why if you're a Protoss player, you need to wall off. Even the badass Adelscott himself not really able to deal with TSLHyun's big pressure plays with those early zergling counts without the wall off. So that's going to basically wrap up this best of 5 series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Once again, this was from the GO4SC2 Cup number 222. So thank you so much for releasing the replays. It definitely helps out. And of course, this tournament was hosted by ESL, and it had a €200 tournament prize pool. So I think that's around $250-ish for you Americans such as myself. So we're going to have to... Well, I guess you can just go ahead and look it up. I don't know if I'm going to be casting any more replays from this series, but or from this tournament. But TSLHyun had the opportunity to go ahead and win those $250. I do believe this is just an online-only tournament, and Hyun proving that he is doing relatively well in those online-only tournaments. And yeah, that's going to wrap it up. So please go ahead and like and subscribe. If you enjoy my commentary in any capacity whatsoever, if you have any feedback, also please leave a comment below, especially about these little sponsor logos that I have down in the corners of, I guess, the little selection area. And of course, big shout outs to all the sponsors of both of these players, as without you guys sponsoring these players, I'd have a hard time seeing so much of these players, especially in those international tournaments. Even though this was an online tournament, being able to see these players move out to those offline LAN events such as, well, I say LAN, but you guys know what I mean, such as MLG, GSL, all those kind of stuff. We have definitely the sponsors to thank. So thank you so much for sponsoring the players and the tournaments and everything. But that's pretty much going to wrap it up, guys. Yeah, not a whole lot else to say. I'll see you guys tomorrow.